Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a book that I read, one that is about capitalism and mayhem. I am referring to Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk, which was published in 1996. Most people are aware of the Fight Club movie, but they do not know that it was a book originally. But for those who don't know, Chuck Palahniuk is an American author known for writing transgressional fiction, which is a genre I didn't really know about, although I knew some of the elements of it, which is just a character coming up against a society that views them as wrong, or they feel that they're not getting what they need from society. And Chuck Palahniuk has written a number of books, including Fight Club, which was his first. So we're seeing his debut novel right here. But he's written a number of other books, including sequels to Fight Club and some short stories here and there. He's won a couple of awards for his work, and he's also become something of a popular figure because people send him Tyler Durden fan mail and whatnot, and people talk to him all the time about Fight Club because it's such a fascinating piece of work. This is the first time I've encountered Chuck's work, but I'd be very interested in seeing some of the other things that he's written. But without further ado, let's talk about Fight Club. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So Fight Club focuses on an unnamed narrator who is feeling a great deal of ennui and boredom in their job, as well as a great deal of insomnia. They can't seem to sleep, and they're just sort of shuffling from one airport to another for their job. But at the start of the story, they're recalling the events leading up to them bombing a financial building in a major city alongside someone that they recently met named Tyler Durden. And the narrator sort of flashes back to sort of the origin there, where they're bored by their job. They're traveling from airport to airport, as I mentioned already, and they run into Tyler Durden, who is a bit of a rogue, a bit of a derelict, not really obeying society's rules, working a number of jobs and doing things to undermine those jobs in the process. Tyler is anti-capitalist and is noting that society is actively hurting men by asking them to sort of restrict their inner desires and whatnot. After the narrator's house or a condo blows up, he moves in with Tyler. And Tyler and the narrator start a fight club, which attracts a lot of other men, even though one of the rules of Fight Club is you don't talk about it. And it allows these men to sort of unleash their anger and frustration with the world and sort of act as a bit of a catharsis, which makes everyone seemingly happy, but then they go back and do their regular jobs the next day. The narrator also meets a woman named Marla, which he does at one of the support groups for cancer and whatnot, that he's been attending to actually feel something, even though he doesn't have cancer or anything like that. Marla's been going for the same reasons, and she's also a bit suicidal. She forms a relationship with Tyler after he helps her when she's trying to kill herself. And although the narrator feels a bit distant from this woman, and Tyler doesn't really want to be in the same room as her. At the same time, the narrator and Tyler are making bars of soap for a new company in order to make a little bit extra money, but they're also building bombs as well, which is a bit zany. And Tyler, at the same time, creates Project Mayhem, which is a step up from Fight Club, and now people are actively going out into the world and causing mayhem, destruction, and hurting other people in an effort to feel something, among many other things. And even the narrator goes out, and Tyler's orders are to get or do some sacrifices and bring back driver's licenses in order to prove a point. And he ends up threatening a man named Raymond Hessel and gets his sort of credit card ID and or just his driver's license in the process. Feels a little bit bad about it. And then the narrator is trying to stop Fight Club and whatnot, but as they go around to the different Fight Clubs that have spawned up, they come to realize that they are Tyler Durden. As it turns out, Tyler Durden is in one of the narrator's identities, as they have dissociative identity disorder, and the narrator is feeling insomnia because Tyler takes control of his body whenever he falls asleep, which probably doesn't have that much basis in society, but for the sake of the story, we're willing to accept it. And so Tyler Durden says that he's going to win. He's going to take down the system, and he's going to use the narrator's body to do it, which upsets the narrator. But again, there's nothing he can do because Project Mayhem and the Fight Club are now their own thing. There's no one person controls it anymore, and like the narrator is trying to stop it, but this angers Tyler, who, along with some of the other members of Project Mayhem, basically kidnap him and take him to the Parker Morris Financial Building in this city in an effort to bomb it. And they say that they'll kill Marla if he doesn't go along with it. But the narrator shoots himself, which effectively kills Tyler at this point. And it seems like the narrator dies. However, as the story comes to a close, we learn that the narrator might actually be in some sort of institution, a mental health facility. And other people are still referring to him as Tyler Durden, suggesting that Project Mayhem and the Fight Clubs are still around. And that's where it ends there. In terms of analysis, there is quite a bit to talk about with Fight Club. One of the themes that Palahniuk is working with here is masculinity. And I feel like this is something that is pretty similar to No Country for Old Men, and that there's the author's intention is ambiguous. So there's and like depending on what their meaning is, it changes the overall sort of effectiveness of the novel. Because on the surface, it seems like Chuck is arguing that the Fight Club sort of restores manhood, that society has taken that away, that the modern America has emasculated men, and so the Fight Club and Project Mayhem restore that and allow men to behave in their true selves, their true way. But on a deeper level, it seems like Palahniuk is saying something different here. That rather than simply restoring masculinity, it's a religious experience for men because it allows them to not just restore their masculinity in an emasculinized society, but to feel like they belong, to feel like they're actually a part of something, whereas before that wasn't possible. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. "You aren't alive anywhere like you're alive at Fight Club. When it's you and one other guy under that one light in the middle of all those watching, Fight Club isn't about winning or losing fights. Fight Club isn't about words. You see a guy come to Fight Club for the first time, and his ass is a loaf of white bread. You see this same guy here 6 months later, and he looks carved out of wood. This guy trusts himself to handle anything. There's grunting and noise at Fight Club like at the gym, but Fight Club isn't about looking good. There's hysterical shouting in tongues like at church, and when you wake up Sunday afternoon, you feel saved." And there's sort of that religious experience, as I noted before, that feeling of belonging. And so on that deeper level, it's not really about becoming masculinized again or becoming the real man that it looks like it is on the surface. Rather, it seems like Palahniuk is talking about loneliness, toxic masculinity, and belonging. And he even kind of affirms that in the afterword in this story, where he notes that women have these stories about female relationships and belonging to groups. He specifically mentions the divine secrets of the Yaya sisterhood, among many other stories. But men don't really have that. And in fact, being friends with other men is seen as somewhat gay in American society, especially on the side of conservatives, where if you have male friends, you're viewed as less than or inferior. And that's the toxic masculinity. You got to show off an air of bravado, lest you be seen as gay or slightly effeminate, and people make fun of you. And so men don't really have that place where they belong, where they're able to interact with others, and it produces a sense of loneliness. And when lonely men have nothing, they often turn to things like Fight Club or Project Mayhem, which is essentially a domestic terrorist group. Like, they don't have that sense of belonging, and they need that. And society doesn't offer that, especially under capitalism, which I'll talk about in a few moments. But at the same time, it does seem like Palahniuk is kind of sincere in talking about the surface level stuff, and talking about how maybe Tyler Durden is right, that men have become emasculized by society and they need Fight Club to regain their manhood. He specifically says like that society has raised, or like that men of this age are raised by women, that their fathers have all left, which is a problem of the previous generation. But in saying that, it does feel like Palahniuk kind of believes that what Tyler Durden is saying, that he's sincere in this critique of sort of modern society as it relates to masculinity, rather than sort of saying that it's the loneliness and the capitalism that's the problem. Now, that's significant, because if it's the loneliness and the capitalism that's a problem, then it feels like an honest critique of what we're doing here, like of what America has become in the 21st century, or the 20th century when this was written. Whereas if you say it's, that Fight Club restores masculinity, and that the effemination of society is the problem, like if you say that, it's not really true. Like, that's not really what's going on. The society makes men feel inferior. Society pushes men to the side and marginalizes, well, not really marginalizes, but it forces them to be solitary and friendless, and sort of proposes rugged individualism, when that helps nobody, because the loneliness doesn't really help anyone. So when society does that, that's a problem of capitalism. It's not really a problem that society has made men more effeminate. Rather, it has made them too independent, too believing in gender stereotypes and whatnot. So I don't necessarily agree with that, and I think the story suffers if that is what Palahniuk is trying to say. However, I'm choosing to believe, or I'm choosing to interpret this as a critique of loneliness and belonging under capitalism and whatnot. And as I mentioned before, like, all of this kind of relates to capitalism, which is another theme of this story. And it leads me to suspect that this is actually what Palahniuk is talking about, because you don't talk about capitalism in this way, or you don't make these kind of points if you're not intentional in that regard. Because the narrator's existential crisis seems to be brought on by the horrors of capitalism in the late 1900s, 1995. The narrator, specifically, they work for a corporation, a car company, and he works for the recall company, and they have a specific formula about whether or not they're going to recall cars. Essentially, if the price of settling out of court is less than the price of recalling the car, and if there's not too many cars out there, then they're not going to recall it. Even if it's a proven problem that's deadly and might lead to countless deaths, the company's just not going to recall. And the narrator has to sit there and watch that happen and see the company exploit people for the bottom line. Like, that's something that alienates, and that's something that sort of disillusions him with modern society, and leads to this sort of existential crisis that leads to sort of this loneliness and feeling like there's a lack of connection. There's also that materialism that Tyler Durden talks about, how like you don't own the stuff you have owns you. And then there's also the idea of tormenting the rich, how the rich believe Tyler Durden to be a cockroach and not even worthy of acknowledging. And so he just pees in their stuff, and that's seen as like a deserving punishment for the bourgeoisie. And that's certainly what a lot of people have told Palahniuk that they've done in the past. So kind of indicating that other people sort of support that message. But in addition, capitalism can be destructive. You see like the entire world torn down around you, the Amazon rainforest coming down, especially in the 90s there, and the ozone layer like being depleted, and just a lot of destruction happening to the earth. And so the narrator develops this destructive mindset to match with the reality in which they live. There's another interesting quote that I'd like to read to you. What Tyler says about being the crap and the slaves of history, that's how I felt. I wanted to destroy everything beautiful I'd never have. Burn the Amazon rainforest. Pump chlorofluorocarbons straight up to gobble the ozone. Open the dump valves on supertankers and uncap offshore oil wells. I wanted to kill all the fish I couldn't afford to eat and smother the French beaches I'd never see. And that gets at the sort of income inequality, but also the sense of capitalism exploiting the earth and sort of pillaging it and destroying it. And the narrator kind of wanting that because that's what they see as wealth. And they see the destruction around them and they're like, oh, I might as well participate in it. Fight Club and Project Mayhem are destructive because maybe destruction is the only way that you can really deal with this capitalist system, although it definitely does not help. It creates more problems. You're hurting more people in the process, and you're not really targeting the true people who are destroying everything. And I think that's why Tyler kind of targets the finance corporations and whatnot, because if you destroy their records, if you destroy their buildings and their centers of power, maybe you'll fix, or like maybe that'll be enough violence to fix the capitalist problem. But again, that's probably not going to help. That's going to cause more destruction and hurt more lives. And it's the records are probably located somewhere else, so it's not really a valid solution, I don't think. But it's clear to see that the loneliness and the toxic masculinity and all of that, and the lack of a sense of belonging is all related to capitalist alienation. That because of this capitalist society, which teaches rugged individualism and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, it's leading to problems with feeling like an outsider and whatnot, and that's really what facilitates the entire story. So in addition to being about that masculinity, it's clear that Palahniuk is really heavily critiquing capitalism here. Another thing worth talking about in this story is the twist. The narrator is Tyler Durden. They are one and the same. I feel that the twist really works in this story as Palahniuk drops a couple hints through the story. He notes that he can see he knows things because Tyler knows them, Tyler doesn't want to be in the same room with Marla when the narrator and Marla are talking, which makes it seem like the narrator is or Tyler is like sort of pushing her away, but it's also because she can't be in the same room, or they all three can't be in the same room because, of course, Tyler doesn't really exist. And so I do like how that works too. How only when the narrator goes to sleep does Tyler pop up, and so it creates an additional problem when the narrator finds out, because how is he going to defeat Tyler? How is he going to regain control of his body if he needs sleep? How can you really avoid that? And then another interesting idea is that sort of pain is seen as freedom in this story, freedom from capitalism. It's probably not. You're just hurting yourself even more. But given that you've lived your life under this sense of depression and loneliness, any amount of pain is going to make you feel something and might seem like an answer, even though it is definitely not. And then this story also seems a bit Freudian, how it talks about wanting to kill God, and how every a lot of men of this generation have been abandoned by their fathers and were raised by their mothers, and it really seems like they want to kill those fathers and perhaps boink those mothers, and it gets at sort of the problems of God and anger at the father figure. So it is a little bit Freudian, although I feel like it's surface level Freudian more than in-depth sort of psychoanalytic exploration of society at this point. There are a couple problems with this story. I do think that the writing kind of borders on conservative teenage edgelord writing at times, where it seems like Palahniuk wants you to think, wow, the narrator or Tyler Durden, they're edgy and they're cool. And I feel like it takes away from the overall message if you write it in that way, where you try to appeal to teenagers and whatnot. That's probably not what Palahniuk is intending, but it's an inadvertent consequence of his writing. But it's excusable given this was his first novel, so maybe he's progressed since that point. And also, it just seems like Marla is just there in the story at times. She doesn't really have that much of a role to play, except to tell the narrator, that he's behaving like a jerk and that he's, responsible for everything because he's actually Tyler. Marla doesn't really seem to have any power or authority in this book, any real agency. So I feel like she could have been written in a better manner. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk. A pretty solid book, definitely. Really, really good one in the month of September. I really enjoyed, the exploration of the dangers of capitalism and masculinity. Of course, as I mentioned before, my opinion of the book kind of changes depending on if Palahniuk was sincere about his talk of masculinity, or if he actually just thinks that's a problem of capitalism. But I'm choosing to give him the benefit of the doubt there. If you have different thoughts on this book, or you simply want to comment on something I said here, do so below. Let's have a discussion about Fight Club. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this book or this author if they don't already know. And also join the Discord if you want to have other conversations about books or movies or video games or whatnot. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and mayhem-filled travels. Farewell.